Welcome everyone to today's Social Fresh webinar. This is what actually works on TikTok, learn from leading brands. I want to do a quick intro of our panelists and a little bit of setting up the topic for today. And then we're going to jump right into some great questions that we've gotten from everyone. If you are just jumping in, you can load questions into the Q&A tab. You can let us know where you're working from today in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can throughout today's webinar. We're going to go for 90 minutes, as many of us that can stay for that long. So stick around if you can. If you can't, this will be recorded and we'll get the video out to you next week. All right, so we have Kimberly Price from Merkley & Partners. Kimberly is the Associate Director of Social Media and works with White Castle and other clients at her agency. Thank you for joining us, Kimberly. We have Nathan Albach joining us, who runs Stakem for his agency, Allback Communications. He's the social media manager. Nathan famously tweets from the Stakem Twitter account and has done some very creative work with Stakem on TikTok as well that we're going to get into, which I'm really looking forward to. We have Dave Jorgensen from the Washington Post, video producer there, who is now producing 2 TikToks a day for the foreseeable future. We'll get into that as a topic, and Sam is also there with him. And we also have Alex Potachik from USA Today, audience editor, emerging platforms. Thanks for joining us, Alex. And then not last, not least, Nick Cicero from Conviva. He is the VP of strategy. And Conviva, definitely check them out. They're our partner for Social Fresh X Conference and for the webinar today. And they are now an insights partner with TikTok. They're a leading social end solution. And I recently updated my knowledge of the Conviva backend, and they just have an immense amount of data for any brand that's working on video and social and really wants better, like across the board insights into your data on live streaming video and on social in general, including they're usually the ones to have metrics access, analytics access for emerging platforms. And Nick has built a lot of that by hand. So we're welcoming all these great panelists. And of course, my name is Jason Keith. I am the CEO and founder of Social Fresh. If you don't know what we are a lean social media conference. We've been doing that since 2008. Had over 25 social media conferences for social media professionals from around the world, focused on brand insights. A lot of these great people today on the panel have been speakers at our events. So thank you to them for that. And today we are talking about TikTok. A few things off the top. When we talk about TikTok, we are approaching it as, again, an emerging platform, but one that's really fastly becoming, and some of our panelists have already described it as already mainstream, and probably the fastest mainstream social network ever. And they've really adapted a lot of the core competencies that a social network needs to succeed globally to a mainstream audience faster than I've seen anyone do. So it's really the first new significant social network since Snapchat, which emerged into that role maybe 6 to 8 years ago. It doesn't feel like that long to me, but that's kind of how long Snapchat's been around. And TikTok's already bigger than a lot of other social networks. Even in the US, it's arguably top 4 in daily audience in the US. So they've got a lot of great numbers. It's very unique compared to other social networks with the vertical video. Really the first vertical video social network that has integrated social network characteristics like commenting really well, discovery, public profiles, collaboration. Snapchat hasn't done all of those things very well, and other vertical video attempts have not conquered that as well and as quickly as TikTok has. There's a lot more to talk about with TikTok, but I do want to jump in to our panelists and get started with some of your questions that you all submitted ahead of time. So Kimberly, I want to start with you. I'd like to kick off our discussion today by talking about the audience on TikTok. You threw out some of this at our virtual conference, Social Fresh X, last month. Can you speak to some of the demographics on the platform and maybe help us understand who is spending time on the platform? Is it mainstream? What are your thoughts on the audience?
Sure, absolutely. So again, I work at an agency, called Merkley & Partners, but one of my biggest clients is White Castle. And for us as White Castle, and a brand that's been around for 100 years and practically invented the fast food category, it was really important to us to speak to a multi-generational audience. We didn't pigeonhole ourselves into a specific demographic. And while we found that audience sort of spread out throughout the various platforms that we're active on, like sort of as an aggregate, I think we all felt like we hit a gold mine when we started advertising on TikTok. So a lot of that was also amplified by the pandemic. And there was a lot of sort of neat sort of development since the pandemic started. So usage by older age brackets have gone up significantly. As Jason mentioned, I recently sort of went through all of this data at Social Fresh. But TikTok did see a 22.3% increase in the 25 to 34 age bracket just from January to April of this year alone, which is a crazy, crazy jump. And then there was also this 24.8% increase in the 35 to 44 age range. So not only are older adults creating videos for the platform, but we found that they're actually getting views for their videos. So there is appetite for this multi-generational content that you're not seeing on other platforms. And some of the viral hashtags and some of the traction that they've gotten really point to that. So over 30 hashtag gets 2.9 billion views. Over 40 hashtag gets 933 million views. Over 50 gets 224 million views, and so on and so on. So, and those numbers that I just quoted were from like a month ago. So they might be a little different now. But they're no less astonishing and really, really valuable to us, again, as multi-generational sort of advertisers. Yeah. And another thing that was super important to us was the sense of family that was on the platform. Again, multi-generational, we want to talk to everybody, but not everybody in their own little vacuum, but everybody together as a collective. So the sort of values of family that White Castle holds, being a family-owned business, which a lot of people don't know, kind of carried over to TikTok and when we found that 57% of TikTok users that we surveyed from an independent study reported having kids at home, and we kind of combined that with everything that we knew trend-wise about the platform, and as well as the tremendous amount of time that these families spent together creating and publishing and consuming content on the platform. It was kind of a no-brainer for us to start advertising on TikTok.
I love that family perspective, because I haven't seen that on another social network where families are actually creating content together. And I think that's really unique. I love this comment from Tiffany in the chat. That's what happens when you invest $2 billion in brute forcing your way into the marketplace. That's totally how TikTok did it. They are backed by the largest funded startup in the world out of China. So they paid their way into success. I will point out though, somebody was going to see this platform. TikTok was basically the winner out of China of about 5 or 6 platforms like this, vertical video, creator focused platforms. So, they did brute force their way into it. And I think that's a valid comment, but they're now actually pulling back on all of that ad spend, and they're still growing faster than anyone else. The most downloaded app in history in the Q1 first quarter of this year. So they definitely paid their way into it, but they're also now legitimately mainstream in many ways. Okay, so next question, I do want to ask you, Nathan. So when it comes to Stakem, I think both Stakem and the internet itself kind of lives and breathes in a subculture environment where expression is these subcultures. With Stakem, you've tapped into kind of the power of that. I think that's a big, reason that your Twitter kind of refresh years ago worked so well, is because you leaned into that subculture nature of Twitter. What should brands understand about what kind of content trends and succeeds on TikTok, and how is this unique from other platforms like Twitter, like Reddit, et cetera? Is it comparable, or do you think it's got kind of its own unique situation going on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's comparable in some ways and then unique in other ways, obviously. It's interesting for me, like with Stakem on Twitter, it's the same as Stakem on TikTok in the sense that there's no 3-point simple solution that you can be like, oh, if you just do these 3 things, then you're going to tap into the subcultures. Like, you really have to spend hours and days and weeks just exploring and figuring out like who the top creators are, what the top content looks like, and just figuring out, where you fit into that. Because in a sense, obviously, it appeals to people for the same reason Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, anywhere else appeals to people, because it taps into entertainment and some forms of value. TikToks that I see could range from beautiful imagery and videography to something really funny, to something really absurd and shocking, to like delicious looking food that's prepared. So that's the kind of obvious similarity, but I guess it kind of differs in the way the videos are edited and presented, because it's a very unique style that only people who are familiar with like apps like Vine really get. It's like a very niche type of humor and editing. So you have like a lot of new tools that the app's constantly developing. So for anyone who's starting on it and trying to figure out, like where do I fit into this? It's just kind of figuring out, how do you edit with this software? And if you're not using a TikTok itself, how do you take it off platform into, Adobe Premiere or something to actually like figure out what are some of the ways that these trends are getting edited in videos, because it's not something that you can just kind of figure out in a day. You just have to kind of explore and see what works, because there's like little tricks you learn that just take
Yeah.
time to nail down.
Well, it's a higher lift. Like there's two layers of that higher lift that you're describing there, which is just learning the culture and learning the technology almost, and both are really required to kind of feel like you belong on the platform, right?
Yeah, and I'm not the first one to say this. I know a lot of people have quoted something around this where TikTok is like it's training an entire generation of kids to essentially learn how to edit video, which it's very unique and very interesting because in the past, obviously, like the sort of threshold to do good content on like Twitter, you just have to be a good writer in a sense. You just have to understand the different skills of writing and the platform itself. Whereas with TikTok, you're being
Yeah,
multifaceted in so many different skills and just learning how to edit and produce and act and all that. So it's
storyboard.
very unique.
Yeah, I
There's a
love
whole
that.
generation of new creators that basically are now
Yeah,
learning how to video edit just sitting at home, not being able to go to school.
I love
Yeah.
that. So, and I do want to. So I've got two questions in the chat already, talking about, and I think this is very timely, of course, because TikTok's been in the news about security issues and is constantly in the news about political stuff. India just banned TikTok for the second time this week. Dave, I want to throw this to you because we talked about this leading up to the webinar a little bit. When someone asks you a question in the direction of is TikTok safe for brands to use right now, like what's your perspective on posting there twice a day on behalf of a brand?
Yeah, I have a pretty unique perspective in the sense that at the Post, we have like 3 or 4 reporters who are dedicated to reporting on TikTok. So that's not to say that like, well, we're holding them accountable, so it's fine, but that is their focus. And my section of the newsroom is to make creative content that is of the Post and supports the Post. And so, that's what I focus on. But, at the same time, we have these concerns about every single network, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. So that's always an ongoing process of, checking it to make sure that this is a safe place to be posting. And as of, today at this moment, we feel like TikTok is a great platform for us. But we're always kind of very critical and making sure that everything is going right for us. One example is, people ask, do you think you're being censored? I've been very diligent in trying to see if we've been censored at any point, and from what I can tell, it hasn't happened. So if that were to become clear that they were censoring us in some way, then we would have a different conversation about whether or not we should be on TikTok.
I think it's really interesting to hear your perspective there because you've been doing this for a while. But one thing to back up from that, I think these are great questions to ask. There's people talking about marketing things like the census, government stuff on TikTok, and how you really do have to be careful about what you're investing in. I would say this: it's definitely invest in the platform from the point of understanding it at a minimum, because these type of security concerns, these type of privacy concerns have happened with every social network we've reported on, we've commented on as they've grown. Of all the networks, I'd say Facebook has the most scrutiny right now. There's a huge ad boycott going on against Facebook, right? And I think we all consider Facebook pretty safe for brands in general. So I think it's always good to ask these questions to pressure these platforms to improve. The caveat that makes TikTok more unique in this situation, of course, is that they are owned by China. And a lot of brands are reluctant, or that causes them some concern. And I think that's rightfully so. I will say whether TikTok is impacted is ultimately, impacted negatively by the US government or other governments like they were in India just now. Something like TikTok is going to succeed, whether it's TikTok or something else. So I think it's important for brands to understand how this type of vertical video creator platform works. And I think it's okay to invest in it in the short term. It's a company that is investing in US leadership. And keep in mind that the US version or the Western version of TikTok and the Chinese version are completely different platforms as well. So I think they're trying to run those two different platforms according to the expectations of those two audiences. So as of now, I don't see huge security issues that I haven't seen on other platforms. I'm not concerned about TikTok not responding to these types of questions, and they have responded every time something like this has come up pretty well. But I don't think the concern is a bad one either. So it's a very specific decision to every brand and every business going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you have new leadership too. Kevin Meyer, who just joined from Disney, right, as somebody that has been a strong leader over at that company and is now going to bring a lot of those values into TikTok. So I think I'm pretty encouraged, as are all the partners that we work with.
I think it's a great point. Okay, Dave, I did have another question I'm going to follow up with. Thanks for jumping in on that topic. But let's, the topic today is what actually works on TikTok, right? It's the title of our discussion. So you've built a really large engaged audience for Washington Post. How would you describe your content strategy, the platform, and what do you think works in general, and what has worked specifically for Washington Post?
Yeah, when we first got on, one of the things that was in my mind of how to sort of run the account was how the Post did Reddit 5 or 6 years ago. And that was basically one guy, Gene Park, who everyone thinks is my boss on TikTok, because I haven't played my boss, but he's not. He's just a guy that likes to be in the TikToks. But he, when he did Reddit for the Washington Post, and he's still kind of active on it, is he had the Washington Post username, and he would just he'd post articles from us, but he also would just kind of comment and interact within the community. And to me, that was a really big deal, because I found the Washington Post account before I even worked at the Post, when I was just browsing Reddit, and it was like in some random subreddit. It's not to say you should just comment everywhere. Like, you should obviously be aware of what conversation you're having and with who on the internet if you can, but finding the Washington Post there was really exciting for me. And so that was the same thing with TikTok. I wanted to kind of make it seem like, we are there on the platform, we know what's going on, and we're not trying to sort of ruin it for you. We actually get what's happening. I always use this stupid metaphor, but it gets my point across, which is TikTok is like a dinner party, and we have been invited to the dinner party. We're not running it. We just brought like a dish to serve. And so we are just there to partake, but we're not trying to ruin the platform for Gen Z. Because I remember pretty well when, my parents got on Facebook and then Instagram and just kind of being like, oh, it's over, it's ruined. Not that was really the case, but that was kind of the overall feeling. And that's what's happening on TikTok now, is they're kind of grappling with, is this place going to be ruined now that there's so many brands on it? And I actually don't think that's happening. I think TikTok is sort of unique in that way, where a lot of brands can really coexist there. And as long as you're kind of in on what's happening, then they're okay with it. So that was been the approach from the beginning. And the other aspect of it is, I come from the creative video team at the Washington Post, which a lot of our videos are host-based. So that was kind of innate in our strategy, that I was going to be in a lot of the videos. I've told Nathan before, it's like I'm a tour guide of the Post. Not a very good one either, just like one that's clumsy and slipping everywhere. And just basically trying to let you have fun, learn about our newsroom, meet everyone in it, and in that way sort of invite you into the Post. And at a certain point, we can kind of actually talk about the current news stories. And that's kind of been one of the bigger pivots recently, is I've been finally able to kind of include more actual news and what's actually going on, while still sort of maintaining the silliness of the account. It's to the point where now we're posting twice a day, and one of them's just me going insane in my apartment. The other one is here's something actually worth learning about.
Yeah, I love that. And then for anyone who hasn't watched Dave's TikToks, he has a couple extra characters, Sam and Pam, who are
Sam has his own face mask now. Someone made him a Sam face mask, which is kind of
wardrobe department for your.
Yeah. A senior software engineer sent this to me. I was like, "Are you should you be working?" But I'm glad. So
yeah. Why isn't Sam on this panel?
I should. I actually, very early on in quarantine, I made a separate Zoom account. Yeah, I used to have Sam log in from my other computer into video team meetings on a separate Zoom thing. And it took a week for people to notice that there was an extra person that was not a human.
Okay, so we've gotten this question a few times, so I just want to jump in and give a couple answers if anybody else has it. But people are asking a couple different ways if TikTok gets banned in the US or other countries. If your business is in a different country, what would replace it, which I referenced briefly before. In the US, I'll point to specifically Dubsmash and Triller, which are still pretty popular apps globally, actually, but definitely in the US. And they're also, Dubsmash specifically is kind of where a lot of these dance moves start. And they're both great platforms. I know there's a new app, I forget the name of it, in India that already has 50 million monthly active users. It's probably going to take over for TikTok there. There's another app called Likee, which was very popular in Asia, but is now also owned by a Chinese company. So for instance, when TikTok got banned in India, Likee also got banned in India because they're both Chinese owned. So those are a few. I don't know if there's any others that anybody else has watched. If not, no worries. But there are a few
Wasn't
out
there
there.
like Lasso or something from Facebook? I don't know.
Lasso was actually shut down this week, but it was Facebook's version. There is an Instagram as well that they've rolled out in a couple countries. Reels, I believe, is the name of it, and that's more likely to be an in-app feature. If Facebook comes out with TikTok competition, it's going to be inside of Facebook. It's going to be inside of Instagram, WhatsApp, etc. So that is all definitely something to keep an eye on as something that could take over pretty easily if they roll it out with the full feature set. Okay, great questions all around. Alex, I want to jump to you, USA Today. So Dave just mentioned this, and I've talked to all of you about this a little bit, but a lot of TikTok content is selfie video facing the camera, and it's personality driven. There's a character drive of some sort. Dave described it as a host, but that's not the only way. Like a lot of businesses, I get this question: does your business have to have a single personality to succeed on TikTok? And USAtoday has done a really great job without doing that. You have a lot of different types of content, reporting, newsreel style content that is not reliant on a single reporter or personality. Talk about your decision of how you kind of came up with your templates and what that looks like in that decision to have a person featured or not.
Yeah, I think Dave actually may have started this rumor that you have to have a personality, because that actually was what I was told by someone very high up in our newsroom, and it surely was not going to be me. But we do when we started our account, we thought about 3 buckets of content. It sounds like Dave is currently thinking about 2 buckets when he's creating his daily TikToks. So in the beginning, we were thinking about 3, and we were sort of just randomly posting any of the 3 types of content. The first one was user-generated content, which we have a huge library of. We pay for subscriptions to the AP Video Hub, to things like Storeful, and our video department is actually just reversioning some of those viral videos for us to use on TikTok, of course, giving credit, and you have to have rights to them and all of that. So that was one type. That's the easiest. Then a second type of content is trends content, which does have some personality to it. 2 of my colleagues, Alex Connor and India Yancey Bragg, are both visible in many of our TikToks from early on. They sort of slowed their appearances as we moved to remote work, just because it became pretty difficult for us all to film and share edits back and forth. And then another person that we've used a lot her name's Annalise Bailey, and she has so much great energy. So we do turn to our personalities for the trends. And when I talk about trends, it could be trending sound, trending effects, a hashtag trend that we want to jump on. And we always try to add, like the Washington Post does, we try to put our branding in there and make sure people know, hey, this is from USA Today. If you're just quickly scrolling through the feed, we want in the visual aspect of it, either a newspaper or a button or sticker, something that shows our brand.
I love that.
Yeah. And then I guess the third type of content, which is something we weren't shy about from the beginning, is creating content around news. Our very first one was goofy. We thought no one liked it. And then we were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't quite go into news yet, but we really did. It's way back in our account, but if you look for early on in our TikTok account, we created one around Facebook deciding to all caps their name. And that was a joke on USA Today. We thought it would be funny if we said like, hey, thanks for copying us, because we all caps our name. So, subtly inserting the news while still having fun with it was what we were doing at the beginning. And then we definitely, about the start of the year, our first very hard news TikTok was explaining what was the situation with the US and Iran. Yeah. And we just, did a very low budget production video, or TikTok, excuse me. video TikTok, same thing. And that was really well received. So we were like, all right, they're ready for it. They're really ready for us to go full into news. And one thing I'll mention is that we decide to create TikToks based off of news when we see a ton of misinformation. So right now we're a little reactive and we're trying to become more proactive in terms of sharing news.
Well, that's another type of trends, I think. So that's, you're paying attention to the content and reacting to it. I think that's a great strategy. A lot of the questions we got were, trying to understand the algorithm of TikTok, and you touched on several things there that I just want to underline, which is paying attention. And Dave, everybody talks about this a lot, but paying attention to trending topics, hashtags, trending sounds, and trending video effects, especially when something's new on the platform. These things can really amplify the reach of your content. So paying attention to those types of opportunities, and that takes a lot of just testing and playing around with the app and discovering what works and what doesn't. Nick, I want to talk to you about, so a lot of the people on the webinar today are trying to either get started with TikTok for their business, or they're thinking about getting started. Conviva and you personally, you all work with a ton of huge brands, NFL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, Red Bull, etc. You have a great client list. When you're working with brands in general, how do you convince them to buy into an emerging platform? Or if you have someone from a brand that wants to get their boss to buy into an emerging platform, what are kind of your thoughts on that budget decision, on that resource decision when it comes to TikTok and other kind of new channels?
Yeah, I think that is, it's always an interesting discussion to have. I think everybody here kind of comes from a little bit of a different background. So there's different reasons why you might join a platform like TikTok, or really any new and emerging platform. Some of the things that we look at is definitely the amount of, I would say, output that you're going to get for what you're putting into it, right? So as Dave mentioned, they have 2 or 3 reporters that are creating content just for TikTok, right? And that's money that the company has to spend, that's time, that's energy. And, there's lots of other social platforms that Washington Post is distributing content to. So really being able to understand, why are we there? As Kimberly mentioned, White Castle is looking to reach more of a diverse, multicultural audience that can span a few different generations. And she saw an insight and tracked it and watched the growth of that. So a lot of times it is really understanding baseline metrics around a certain platform. It doesn't always have to be like a vanity metric like views or engagements. Sometimes it is, what's the quality of the engagement that we're having on there, right? If you're creating a lot of content, you might not have a lot of followers, but there's a lot of people commenting and interacting with you, and you're building kind of a community, then that could be a great way to enter a new platform. You might be looking to actually activate and look at a particular outcome, right? So you might want to dive into ads because you can see that there's a certain amount of success that you might be able to invest with money attached to that. But typically, I think that it's really about the metrics of what are we going to be able to prove and how are we able to move the needle, right? Because you have all these different platforms to invest your time into. And then being able to establish that baseline and track above and beyond it. So, we always are putting out different benchmarks for the content organically on TikTok. So people that want to open up a channel, they want to publish videos, and obviously that can differ. The follower counts on TikTok is actually a little bit less important as it might be on other platforms. And it's really more about the interest and the engagement and the depth of viewing on the video. So it's really about being able to take a look at some core level of metrics and understand over a certain period of time, can we move the needle and make a case for the outcome that happens with that. So I think it's going to depend for every different brand, but ultimately you want to figure out the why. Why should we be there? Because it's going to have a lot of engagement, or because the audience that we want to reach is there, or because we think we have, a great voice that could fit for TikTok. And then once you kind of establish that why, pick a set of metrics that you can test and see if you've grown against those.
Yeah, and there's a huge opportunity for organic reach numbers on the platform. So if you're looking for that top of funnel awareness, I think that's something to zero in on, how you can potentially get those large numbers. We'll talk to Kimberly in a minute about some of the ad side and what they've had experience with. So I think that's also, if you're looking for more, direct response, sales, hard ROI numbers, that's an option as well. So I think there's opportunities here to make either of those cases. I do want to, I'm going to throw a question your way, Nathan, but something, Nick, you mentioned, and Alex has mentioned, a lot of questions we got around brand. So how do we bring our branding to the platform? How do you do a TikTok and still look authentic? Alex, you touched on a couple of things of you're always trying to include the logo or include a prop. I think Nathan and David both included props really well in their TikToks. I'll point to an off TikTok example, which is, sometimes you don't have a physical product, right? You're not a consumer packaged good. You don't have something that you can put in the shot that represents your brand in a kind of a natural way. But when you look at the example of like a sticker or a business card that Alex mentioned, if you look at, credit card companies will use a credit card. You can do these soft focus photos on Instagram that do really well and work really well photo wise, but it's also putting their brand really front and center. You can do stuff like that with any kind of prop. If you have a chapstick with your company logo on it or something stupid, you can really be creative in ways that you can kind of find physical goods that represent your brand to put into kind of the storytelling format. So I would think about that. With that, Nathan, how, just simply like how are brands, how should they think about being authentic on a platform where it's still kind of low production, a lot of ways, but I think there's still a big opportunity for brands to tell stories in really a plethora of ways. How do you think about that?
Yeah, just on the topic that you just went off on, I think it's important, just in my perspective, that the branding within organic TikToks comes secondary and subtle in most cases. I think about it in terms of relating back to Twitter, whereas Twitter is kind of the primarily text-based personification of brands, whereas TikTok's more like the video personification. But like when you're following a brand like a Wendy's or a Moon Pie or Denny's or whoever, they're not overtly being like, eat at Wendy's every tweet or like, shoving their logo into everything. I mean, it's mostly just this is their personification, and then they slip in the logo and they slip in the branding wherever it fits and feels right. So that's like what I would add to that. I think
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, Dave particularly, I know, like does that well with like just little subtle things. Like we call them Easter eggs, right? I mean, it kind of like especially if you mix them in with other props and other just kind of regularly appearing things like bits within your videos, then it becomes fun and it becomes something that the audience actually wants to see, rather than when they're scrolling and catching all this content that they're enjoying like moment by moment. Then they get like hit with a big logo and it's like, oh yeah, this is an ad, I don't want to see this. So that's just like my general opinion.
Unless the logo is a big helmet.
Unless it's yeah, exactly. Unless it's like the actual character itself, right? I cheat in that way. But no,
So
I mean, I think
for anybody that doesn't know Steak'em's TikTok, Nathan does have a mascot professional Steak'em box that is his head or another actor's head that is a large portion of some of the TikTok videos that people understand.
yeah, it's super absurd. It's just like a helmet mask thing of the product itself. And yeah, I think even to that point, like that kind of speaks to just what we are, quote unquote, as a brand, where Steak'em's advertising and personification has always been absurd and kind of crazy and weird. I mean, you look at like ads they've done over the decades and how that product has fit into pop culture. It's usually made fun of for being ridiculous. It's like a cheap frozen meat product that I refer to as frozen beef sheets. And because of that, it's kind of like a self-aware meta thing. So with our TikToks, we very much play into that. It's very much a goofy kind of meta, just making fun of ourselves, just being, and especially because it's me. I would say this correlates with any brand out there. I mean, depending on what the brand is and then who the people are behind that brand, you have to kind of find what is authentic, like you were saying, Jason,
Yeah.
to that brand. Like for me, I'm a millennial, but I'm also like a little bit like at the millennial phase of starting to get out of touch, just like Steak'em the brand, which is like from the 1970s. So, and it's similar to Dave even. Like Dave, Dave and I are the same age, and he's working for a legacy media company that most Zoomers don't care about. So it's like part of our job is to kind of embody and personify and make fun of ourselves and not try to act like we're Zoomers and not try to act like we're something that we're not. So I think that's really important. I mean, if you're a Zoomer brand and you have Zoomers working for you, obviously that's a whole other thing. But whoever you are and whoever that brand is, like you have to kind of figure out, how do you make sense of this video platform, and just don't try to be something. Like don't try to be cool. don't try to act young, don't try to act old, like don't like just be wherever you fit into that, and people tend to reward you over time.
Yeah, the self-deprecation works super well. I mean, and it should. It's like even the last few weeks when we've had more serious news topics, I've been the sort of idiot in the TikTok. So it's kind of allowed to be like, we're not trying to preach to you, like I'm learning too, that aspect of it. Also, I'd add with Steakums, I meant to tell you this. I was in the grocery store yesterday and I just walked by Steakums in the freezer and I just started laughing like uncontrollably. So like, and I think that's actually super effective. I really do that. If anything, I've just now recognized Steakums as something, as someone in the Midwest who's never even seen it until I moved here. So it's working.
That's a beautiful thing. That's awesome. Yeah. And also, I'm sorry.
Apology accepted. And thank you.
Okay, so question from the audience, and I'm going to jump over to you, Kimberly. And I want to throw this to Nathan, to you. I'm just curious on a planning side of this. I know Alex and Dave both are, at news organizations, so they're doing TikToks. If they're doing them on a daily basis, they're making those decisions pretty quickly, and the content's very timely, and it's in response to news and in response to the very current trends. For Steakum, the question is, how far in advance can people actually plan for future campaigns on TikTok? Are you planning stuff a week, a month, multiple months out? What's that look like for your side?
Oh, sorry, this is for me, right?
Yeah.
Just double checking. I thought I heard Nick,
yeah.
But it was Nathan. For us on TikTok, I mean, it's definitely, I operate day to day, but I think in part that's due to the resources available. I mean, I think depending on how TikTok fits into a brand's broader social media strategy, it can obviously play out in different ways. And for me, it's similar. I treat it similar to Twitter in the sense that throughout the day, whether it's when I first wake up or just when I'm, working throughout the day, or when I get home and I'm eating dinner or watching TV, whenever I have an idea or I'm just scrolling through something, I just write it down. So, I mean, it's in part planned. I mean, like I can get to a point where I can flesh out some ideas and then maybe plan them a little bit ahead. But for the most part, like everything is in real time. It's hard enough. I mean, Dave will tell you, I'm sure too, because he's doing 2 of these a day, which is crazy. Like when you're trying to write and script these things and produce them, I mean, it's really, really hard to get ahead of the ball. I mean, like I said, if you have resources to do that, if you have multiple people working on a team and you're like carefully planning them out like week by week, that's another thing. But for us personally, yeah, it's been more like in the moment. As soon as I record and produce them, they're usually released in a matter of like hours or that day.
Sorry for the noise. I live right by a fire station, so if that comes back, just FYI. Dave, I'll let you jump in. This question was Madeline in Seattle, so thanks for the question, Madeline. And just if I'm summarizing your answer, Nathan, like if you had the team and the manpower, you think you could plan in advance, even though TikTok is such a high trend platform.
Yeah, because it's like any other form of content. Like it's good to have stuff on deck in case you hit a rainy day, right? Like rainy day content, or if something becomes relevant, like if you're doing a piece of content and it's just kind of like an evergreen type of thing, and then there's a day where the content within that piece is more relevant, then it makes sense to post it. There's a lot of ways to do that, but yeah, like day to day, the big thing I know for TikTok is just being on trend and like trying to catch the wave when it comes in. So it can be tough to plan for some of those things to kind of get the viral algorithm bump,
Yeah, I wanted to clarify an earlier point. When I was talking about like we have 2 to 3 reporters at the Post who report on tech, and so that's what they're focused on. But in terms of the TikTok team, it's just me in my apartment going insane. But and as Nathan kind of noted, like I actually am leaning into the manic energy of it because I am making them and coming up with them that day. And I think like knowing that the weakness is going to be going into quarantine was going to be that like I had to make these all by myself with no one even filming them because my wife has a real job, so she can't do it. I just leaned into the insanity because if people kind of know that it's really tough and weird and crazy, then it actually kind of makes it funnier in this particular case.
Yeah, I think that. Kimberly, let's jump to TikTok ads. So White Castle has done an ad campaign on TikTok. What have you learned from the TikTok ad options and lessons learned that other people can think of? And do you think TikTok ads in general are a good opportunity for a lot of brands to take a closer look at?
Sure. I actually wanted to participate in the previous conversation because to Nathan's point about not having to sell your product, that's something that's super valuable to CPG and retail food because your goal is to imprint your brand onto people's brains. So you're top of mind when they go to the store. And I know that because White Castle also has a retail product and we found that we could be a little more absurd. I'm not, this is off the record, but I think we were a little inspired by you, Nathan, and your work with Steak-umm. And we got a little experimental, we got a little silly, and it weirdly worked. And sales are up, and that's because, you know, like Dave, people pass by the product now, and they have this positive association with the product when they're in the aisles and shopping. And so, so kudos to Nathan for teaching us a lesson there.
My check is in the mail, I hope.
That was a neat revolution.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you know, TikTok is such a new platform, and they're, I think, still learning how to work with advertisers. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. We've been running TikTok ads on behalf of White Castle since about Q4 of last year. Don't quote me on that. So it's after, and that was after sort of a year's worth of meetings with TikTok representatives and their ad sales team, and we were really scrutinizing their platform. But you don't have to feel bad for them because we did the same thing to Reddit as well. But unlike the other brands here, we wanted to run advertising before establishing an organic presence. So White Castle does not have an organic presence. You cannot find us on TikTok because we really wanted to be cautious. We wanted to test and learn what works on the platform quietly and secretly and get a feel for how effective the platform would be as part of our media mix and along what KPIs and how. So it sounds like I'm due for a chat with Nick Cicero soon before we invested more money and manpower into creating the content and maintaining the community. So again, like Nathan and Dave both said, it's a tremendous amount of work that goes into it, and we needed to balance the media budget and the media benefit with the production budget and the production benefit. And for us, we wanted to sort of play it safe. So that's why we exclusively ran advertising, and we exclusively continue to run advertising and not maintain an organic presence. So here's what we learned from, I guess, half a year's worth of advertising. So we're gonna start with the down funnel stuff because that's what puts the fun in funnel. So as far as what drove conversion for White Castle, we saw the highest CPCs, so that's no bueno, for creative that did not feature people. So a close-up of one of our sliders, a close-up of our product with a stock photo background or even a real background, even when we use real photography or real video, did not work. It just absolutely fell flat, just absolutely horrible metrics all around. So as far as what did drive conversion, where you know, we saw really low CPCs, really great click-through rate, was stuff that was affinity based. So that was our way around sort of working with a really limited, you know, with sort of limited production and limited sort of assets to choose from. So we did some audience research. We found out that White Castle's audience has an affinity for superheroes. So we developed this comic book style post with superheroes, and that performed really well. So leaning into the affinities of your audience, we found was really successful. We also had a hunch that TikTok was probably going to serve our awareness objective probably the best. So we put most of our investment into awareness driving posts. To be honest, we were a little disappointed. We broke even. Pretty much, but we did learn a few interesting things. So we created a handful of assets that were native to the platform, so using the same look and feel and language that we found on TikTok, and we pit those against assets that were made for other platforms, whether they were ads that ran on television or ads that ran on other social platforms. Just to, you know, our theory was that the ones that were created specifically for TikTok were going to do well. That actually surprisingly did not happen. There were certain themes in terms of the stuff that performed well and the stuff that didn't. So again, it was the ability to feature humanity was incredibly important. And the ads that did well had some sort of narrative tied to them. So it wasn't just showing a person, because we did create some TikTok ads that were just like, hands pointing or hands grabbing sliders or doing things like that. And it's when you paired humanity with a narrative is when sort of the magic happened. And then the ads that did well also, and to the credit of everyone here, because this was a really tough one for us, the ads that did well also were humorous. They took a really humorous approach. They were lighthearted. They weren't too heavy. They weren't too salesy. They were silly. And those were the ones that were getting the really sort of low CPMs and were really cost effective for us. So, you know, if I were to sort of recommend anything from the various tests that we've been running for 6 months, and 6 months is not a significant amount of time, so take this with a grain of salt, but show people, and if possible, show people full body. Full body was another sort of trend that we took away from,
that's
from
interesting.
performance. Yeah, and then tell a story around it. I mean, without even featuring talent, because we're a little strapped in that sense. We're also a SAG signatory agency, so we're really strapped in that sense. But without even when you feature talent, put a story around it. Craft a story around it. Make it a funny story. We used stock photo, for instance, in one of our best performing, or stock video in one of our best performing ads, and our creatives just had a ball making up this completely fake narrative about this fisherman named Old Willie, and it was just silly, but it was completely made up, and it was completely using stock video, and that was our best performing ad out of, I'd say, 9 ads in a quarter.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
It sounds like an Old Spice ad. Old Willie.
Yeah.
I love that. So the humanity and the storytelling, I mean, I've heard that from all kinds of organic TikTok as well. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Alex, like building on that, you all have these explainer videos that do tell stories, news, but like they, you know, they're low production. You're taping, you're literally printing out things from a desktop printer, taping them to the wall as like a time lapse thing as explainer. And those do just as well as your high production video editing, newsreel type of. Tell me about the decision on production value and like how you think about that through different content options on TikTok.
Yeah, so someone had asked if TikTok's the only platform that I work on, which it's not. I work on any of our platforms that are brand new to the world or new to the industry, or even just like new to our newsroom. So one thing we do on every platform, and this goes for TikTok as well, to go back to Dave's dinner party analogy, we always think about looking and feeling like the content on the platform and making it fit that platform. So a saying that I always tell people when they're starting out creating content is, if you're being invited to a party and everyone's dressed in blue jeans, you don't want to be the one showing up in a ball gown. So the idea there is to look and feel like the other content as you're scrolling through. You don't want to feel like an advertisement. No offense to anyone who uses super well production. But another piece is that our team at USA Today, it's made up of 2 audience editors and a reporter. We're not video experts. We are the kids that everyone speaks of who are learning how to video edit in the app. And we do use a couple other tools. We've tested out Adobe Rush as a tool that we can use, and Adobe After Effects. But yeah, we're really just trying to feel like the content that's there. Actually, while we've been on this webinar, I got a notification to my phone that poetry words, those poetry magnets that you can stick to your fridge or stick to a chalkboard, have been delivered. So look for those. We're gonna start using those a little bit. We were joking about getting some like plastic, you know, those like kitty plastic letters that you can put on your refrigerator that are bright and colorful, and creating TikToks with those. We're stuck at home for the foreseeable future, so we're gonna have to start getting a little more creative. But we posted a TikTok yesterday that was like, oh my gosh, it's that TikTok that's like January, February, March. So all it is blank white background with black text of the headlines, and it tells you like, you know, January, February, March. It's basically just, the point is to show that it's been a whirlwind of 6 months, and we better buckle up for another 6 months. we've gotten some really positive feedback in the comments, which is something that we do our best to pay attention to the comments to see how users are receiving our content, and people seem pleased with us looking and feeling like the content that they're able to create, not being too highly.
Authenticity. I love it. Nick, I kind of want to jump to you for this because you are working with some of these huge brands that do so much content on Facebook, Facebook Live, Instagram Story, YouTube, etc. How are you seeing the difference in the shift from producing content on these existing channels, social channels, to TikTok? How are people adjusting their content? Is it look like the same conversation we're having where everything has to be a little more authentic, or what kind of trends are you seeing there?
I mean, I like both variants of what Alex and Dave mentioned. Those are both great ways to kind of describe it. I think that every platform has evolution, and even I think the earliest probably videos on Facebook before people started to blow up and do the explainer videos on Facebook, they started a little bit raw, or they used videos that they might have put up on YouTube that may have been a little bit more polished or could have been more blog style. But interestingly enough, I think while TikTok, like the actual output and of the creative, I think resonates a lot more with what Alex and Dave and Nathan had said. It's a little bit more raw, less polished. I think the metrics are what's interesting. So we are seeing a lot of these video focused platforms all essentially settle on some of the same types of metrics. And I'm not really talking about video views. We're talking about like retention through a video, or average watch time, or the minutes consumed. And those are all pretty heavily weighted metrics in TikTok's algorithm, but they're also high signs of success on YouTube and on Facebook, or increasingly on Instagram TV, for example. So in general, I think people are trying to look at the same types of ways to apply data to their creative to TikTok, and I think that is starting to take hold, especially with the groups that we work with, because they are the same people that might have been working on Instagram or Twitter video has grown pretty significantly. So now they're trying to figure out, how do I apply those same data and insights, and how do I bring them over to the content that our TikTok team might be producing? So for folks like the NFL, they have teams that are just dedicated on creating this really awesome TikTok content, but they have a huge team of analysts and research that are also going in and digging in and applying the same types of methodologies and metrics to those new platforms.
Yeah, we got a question here from Shans Nahar. What goes behind TikTok's algorithm for sensing user preference? And we've touched on a few things that can help you with the algorithm, but I think what you're speaking to, Nick, is important. Retention views on videos is very, very important. TikTok has come out and said this specifically, meaning the more of your video that users watch, the more TikTok will assign affinity to that user for your content, and the more they will share your content in the feed in general organically to other users. So that's come with recommendations from folks. I've heard 10 to 15 second videos work really well, 12 to 19 second videos work really well. And the reason shorter videos work well is because people are going to watch more of them more easily, right? I've also heard, and this makes sense, I don't know if TikTok has confirmed this, but that looping videos or seamlessly looping videos work well, because TikTok is if you're watching a video more than once, they're assigning more value to that interaction, right? So it's the same kind of metric.
As a metric we're hearing kind of come up a lot more lately.
Yeah. And then just to broaden that conversation a little more, TikTok is paying attention to what types of videos you like, right? So if you're constantly rewatching dance videos, you're constantly rewatching fishing videos, or like that smashing stuff videos, like there's all kinds of categories. They're pulling captions, they're pulling hashtags, they're paying attention to the categories that users select when they first sign up to the app. They're paying attention to the words that the videos that you use in their captions, that use in their profile, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that is creating category affinities as well behind the scenes. And then Nick mentioned this earlier, but a follow on TikTok is less important than it is on other platforms, but it's still a metric that TikTok looks to. So if you do follow, you are more likely to see content from that account. But TikTok is much more of a meritocracy when it comes to the value of the content. If your content is just not getting completion views, repeat views, if people are scrolling past it, it's not going to get shared, even if you do have followers. So I think, anybody else have any algorithm kind of tips, how people can think about what is getting reshared, what is getting organic views on the platform that I haven't mentioned yet?
One thing I always talk about is like piggybacking on a viral sound. So if you see something that's like either an original sound or just a song that suddenly some people care about, and within like 24 hours, this is a really popular sound, if you can jump on it within that day, you basically just like piggyback onto their sound, and you show up after them on the For You page sometimes, things like that. So if you can just really quickly jump on a viral sound, that helps a lot.
Yeah, so for people that haven't really dived into the app a lot, you can look at sounds on TikTok just like you can look at hashtags on most platforms, meaning you can look at all the people that have used a sound, who the original person that posted the original sound was. And at the top of that page, you would see on Instagram, it'll show you the most successful videos that have used that sound. So Dave's talking about getting on that list early, being one of the most engaging posts on that sound, and that can kind of drive your content to more views and more reach. I think it's a great tip. We had a question, what's the difference between the Chinese and US versions? I touched on that a little bit early of the app. So there's basically a wall. It's Douyin in China and TikTok for the rest of the world. It's two different apps for all intents and purposes. We work with a couple companies in China that pay attention to how TikTok works in China. And the general sense is that TikTok is about 2 years ahead in China compared to the app that the rest of the world uses, meaning there's a lot more features. They test things out there first. And obviously there's a lot more government control over the Chinese version as well. There's censorship in a real way on the app in China. But most of the, if you see content that's popular on TikTok in Asia, it's not coming from China usually. It's coming from Japan, Singapore, Philippines, etc. So it's kind of walled off, and it has more features in China. If you want more information on the Chinese version of the app, if that's relevant to your business, definitely shoot us an email and we can connect you with companies that really specialize in that. You can email me, Jason at socialfresh.com. We can connect you with those types of folks. Dave, let's say that you are a person that is committed to personally posting 2 TikToks a day for some reason for the foreseeable future. Tell me about the creative process for that, how you do it, and how you find trending topics to keep your audience engaged with that type of demand on your time.
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier, where there is playing into what's happening. Not to say that like this is all really fun, but like playing into the like everyone else is quarantining their apartments and that sucks, as it has been like a really great window into just like how I approach every day. So for the most part, I try to keep it fresh. I might have a few ideas I write down during the day that I don't carry out, and then the next day I wake up and that's something that I might look into. But I really am just trying to, again, piggyback on trending sounds, or maybe there's a hashtag that they put on the Discover page. So there's the For You page, and then there's Discover, which is the tab right next to it. And the Discover is more of TikTok sort of editorial, where they usually add 3 hashtags a day. One of them is usually like a sponsored hashtag, and we don't participate in those, but the other 2 are just like fun challenges that are trending on TikTok, for instance. So if I see that at 9 a.m. when they post it, then, and if it's something that might work for what I want to talk about that day, whether it's the news or just going crazy, I try to make that work to my advantage. So a lot of it is like, not unlike just being on the platform itself and meeting them in the middle as a really old newspaper, also meeting in the middle of like a really fun meme. Like, how can I take this idea I have about we need to be wearing face masks, and this audio I found that's really funny. That's actually the first TikTok we posted today, was just trying to take those 2 things and combine them into something that's funny and effective. So yeah, it's a struggle sometimes. Some days it's really easy, some days it's not. We kind of talked about quality too. Like even just in regular TikToks, when I have a TikTok that took me 30 minutes and it goes viral, I'm kind of mad about it, because sometimes it takes like 4 hours to make. Like I did this really involved TikTok where it was like a Law and Order episode, and it took me like a solid 3 to 4 hours, and I was really proud of it. And that one did like fine, kind of. And then I also misspelled quarantine in it. I was like so mad about, or Washington in it. That's even worse. But that's all to say that there's always ways to kind of just wake up the next day and have fun with it. And that is the point of TikTok. Like you might have had a bad day yesterday, but the next day you could go viral by like 10 a.m. So, and actually speaking of that misspelling, I ended up making a TikTok about what it was like to misspell something on TikTok and just be in my apartment all day mad at myself. So there's always ways to build on something, failure or success on TikTok.
So a lot of it is really just paying attention to what's trending and thinking creatively in response to that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm getting, it makes me, we got a lot of question variations of what type of resources does it take? How much content do I need to have to launch on TikTok? How much should we be posting to be successful? I've talked to a lot of you about this type of resource question. Some general, I'll give like a general summary. If anybody wants to add more detail, feel free. But a lot of the best practices I'm hearing are, if you can, posting once or twice a day is the ideal. Dave, I know you told me that if Washington Post doesn't post for like a long weekend, call it 3-4 days, you notice an immediate drop off. I think Alex, you told me similar things. If you're not posting on a regular basis, the next several videos that you'll post do drop off in reach. And then on the back end of that same scale, what's kind of the minimum expectation? Most people are saying you should really be posting once a week if you want to see longer term success and reach. I will say, if you want to just jump in and play and experiment, I think that's worthwhile. I think you should do it with personal accounts first, and then have a plan of how you can sustain something weekly or even monthly on the platform. I think that's okay, as long as you're not judging the results that other people are getting. They're posting weekly, daily, twice a day, etc. Any other comments on kind of that resource question, how brands should think about because it's a high production really addition to a lot of social programs.
Nick, I think you unmuted, so I assume you want to say something. You go first.
You go first. No,
Okay.
You go first.
We always think about quality over quantity. We at one time were producing, I think just before we all headed home and started working remotely, some days we were producing 3 TikToks a day, and that was a lot. We were having a lot of fun and it was working for us, but we definitely scaled back. We post, I'd say now, about 3 to 5 times a week, and that's even an uptick since the last couple months. But yeah, just if it's a good video, here's hoping it does well. Don't just post to post. You're going to hurt yourself more in the algorithm than if you post quality and space them out a little bit.
Nick?
Yeah, I was going to say that, and I'll drop a link here in the chat, but we worked on a TikTok benchmark report earlier this year, and that was one of the things that we did see among high performing accounts. At least, obviously it's going to vary from just starting to being more of an established brand that can port followers maybe from other channels too. But we did see that the fastest growing TikTok accounts were more of the traditional media, sports, television, publisher, and you can kind of see inside of the data that those that were posting more frequently would oftentimes get a lot more rapid follower growth. And so, I think that it did start out with some folks doing 2 to 3 videos a day. I think now it's settled into a little bit more between 1 to 2 on average. But certainly, at least in kind of the initial go round, it seems to me like there are, there's kind of an influx of content creation maybe when you first join the platform to kind of get your rhythm, and then you kind of settle into a cadence based on, how you actually jump into the community, right? Because you're not always going to know how you fit in, right? You don't always have a full-blown strategy going into the platform, right? Maybe you develop a series from something else that you see, and then that helps anchor a weekly cadence of content. So I think that, but just in general, based on the numbers that we've seen for those high volume accounts, definitely posting more frequently has led to a faster follower growth of these more established brands, at least.
Yeah. Another question we're getting, what's the best way to deliver educational content on this platform? Again, I'll point to the USA Today content. You have these explainers. I think that's a really great template. There's a lot of ways to do explainers. You can look at Now This for kind of the kitchen video reel strategy. You can also look at Planet Money, which is a weirder explainer kind of template that seems to be working really well for them. So I think thinking of that explainer template and what your brand has done on other platforms to have kind of an explainer strategy would be a first place to start, but also looking at other brands that are doing that well. There are kids producing news on the platform that are just low production explainer videos that work really well.
I would say the Carnegie Museum of Natural History is a great account to follow on TikTok if you haven't already. They are talking about all sorts of things that you might talk about if you were to go into a museum, but they do it in a very unique way. So like Nathan said, you have folks at different levels and almost poking fun at yourself. They're giving you all this nature and natural life information, but they're doing it through dad jokes or other types of creative content on TikTok. So they're a pretty good example of both, a museum, I would say, but also something that's semi-educational that isn't also just news focused too.
I like that. That's great. There's let's see. Madeline asked, Dave, how did WAPO get team buy-in from leadership to have a completely different brand expression on TikTok?
Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt, and I have to go. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the great discussion, everyone. This was super fun, and I hope you all in the audience learned something.
Yeah,
Thanks,
great seeing you, Kimberly. Thanks for everything.
Add data. We are going to hang out for at least another half hour, which as many of your questions as possible. Anything we don't get to, feel free to ping me, jason@socialfresh.com, and we will follow up with these smart folks and get more answers in another format, follow up in email, blog posts, etc. But Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, first thing, I actually kind of give credit to Post leadership for being open to this kind of thing. And the reason I felt comfortable approaching my bosses there, like all 20 of them, with this idea was that we've always kind of tried to get ahead of things. Like Snapchat, we were fairly early adopter on Snapchat, and like Reddit, I pointed out earlier, we've always kind of tried these platforms. So I already knew that it would be okay to ask, and I was actually met pretty positively. I also kind of overdid it like a kid who's really trying to get an A on his report, and I gave them like each an 8-page write-up where I answered my own questions that I knew they were going to ask, and I handed it to every person in this meeting when I was proposing TikTok. So it was a little bit of that and a little bit of getting lucky too. I think the first like 3, but especially the third TikTok we posted just went basically viral, and so the buy-in was pretty easy. It also was kind of easy to use Twitter to promote TikTok, and that's been a really effective way ever since then, actually. Of just like the very first TikTok I did was with someone's dog from work, and I tagged Darth in it on Twitter, and Darth retweeted it, and that was like all it took. And from there, we've just kind of used Twitter as another way to sort of hype up our TikTok, and it's been a great way to kind of use 2 platforms to promote TikTok.
How do your view counts compare on TikTok and off TikTok when you share the videos on another platform?
It really does depend. I do kind of have like a Venn diagram in my head of TikToks that are for Twitter and TikToks that are for TikTok. And every so often we do kind of make a TikTok that's really just meant for the Twitter audience, and hopefully does well on TikTok. And that's a little bit of a gamble, but that usually like we did one with Marty Barron, who's our executive editor, like way back when, and that did really well on Twitter. And TikTok didn't really understand what was happening because we were comparing it to Liev Schreiber, and none of them had seen the movie Spotlight. There's a lot of things going on that like you wouldn't expect a 14-year-old kid to get. But that was actually great because then it brought a bunch of people onto our that literally downloaded TikTok or started following us actively on Twitter so all these things happened from that. So there was a sort of bonus in that. In terms of view count though, it's hard to tell. I do intentionally, when I post to TikTok on Twitter, I use there's a way you can tweet a video and do a different caption for it. So I do that a lot, just to kind of keep the view count so I can always keep track of it on Twitter. I just use the exact same video, if that makes sense. So yeah, it always gets more views on TikTok overall by the end of the day, but it does do well enough on Twitter that it's definitely worth posting there as well.
Nice. We have a question that's, let's see, Bhuvan Astana, TikTok filed for banking license in Singapore recently. Is it all about content, or are there different plans for using video as user acquisition? I will say social networks in Asia especially are more diversified with their revenue, meaning they are like platforms. There's a lot of purchasing of products, services on social networks. In Asia, there's a lot of buying of stickers and other themes and things like that by users. US social networks, Western social networks are more focused on ad revenue, almost exclusively driving. So the fact that, I'm not surprised TikTok is doing some type of payment processing potentially. That's why they would get a bank license. And it's something Facebook is trying to do as well. Pretty much every social network that thinks they're going to become big enough that they need new revenue from non-advertising resources is looking at payment processing as an option. So that's not a huge shock. I'm actually shocked that it's news that it didn't happen sooner. What are expected outcomes for some brands on TikTok? Top of funnel awareness, discovery, bottom of funnel sales. We've touched on that a little bit. I'll just reiterate, I think organic reach, there's a really high ceiling there that people can really generate a lot of organic reach views on the platform for top of funnel awareness. I've seen good ad campaigns that have delivered on click-throughs, that have delivered on direct sales, especially driving to apps. And we've got a couple questions about attribution models. TikTok will tell you the most recent stuff I've heard and seen from them. They've got some public resources on their how that you can go through on the US side. But I've seen people from TikTok recommend either a view through or a last click through as the main two attribution models. And some of that depends on if you're going to an app or not, but talk directly if you want more information on that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for different outcomes from brand campaigns. It really just depends on your specific goals. I'm going to try to get to as many of these questions as possible. You guys are asking a lot of great questions, so just keep sending them and we'll get to as many as we can. Does adding text into a video help performance, or is it better to have a clean video with only language and caption copy? It doesn't matter. Alex, you touched on this a little bit on how off-platform kind of, but have you seen text impact anything, or has anybody else seen that?
We actually try really hard to put a lot of text on our videos to give them context. We, again, thinking about how people react on other social platforms, we know a lot of times they aren't reading the caption. So if we just started playing, there's a PSA that posted to our account today of like wearing a mask. If you watch that TikTok without having any of the captions on the screen, it's very confusing why she's wearing the mask, then she takes it off, then she puts it to the side, even with the sound that's on it. So we could put in the caption, like, here's the right way to wear your mask, or PSA, please wear your mask. But having that, those captions pop in and out, which is incredibly difficult to do on the TikTok app. You have to be like super expert and it's very finicky. Sometimes they get like really bold. Sometimes they move off to the side of the screen. But without having that text on screen, you just like, it's not as beneficial of a TikTok. So I can't say whether or not, I don't know if anyone else has any data about whether or not videos with captions baked into them do better or worse. But I think for a user experience, we definitely like to include them.
Yeah, so I mean, some types of content on TikTok kind of require it, especially some trends are kind of built around it and some aren't. So I think it's that user experience is a good way to think about it. Does anybody know if I haven't really heard one way or another whether captions actually impact. I'm sure if you're adding captions to the video, that TikTok knows that the text is there and maybe they use that for some context, but I don't really know if that's pointing to anything in the feed or not, performance-wise. It's a good question. Let's see. Anybody have experience using any of the other features on TikTok? We've had a few questions on, can you do polls on TikTok? Can you do live video? Can you, people talking about, collaboration opportunities on TikTok, whether that's duets. I'm assuming they're talking about duets and or influencers, and your experience of some of these other kind of side features of the platform.
I've used most of those, I think, and they all work for the moment. I know that live can work really well for certain accounts. We've only done one live thing, and it was a 25-hour live stream, and it was fun, but we're still trying to figure out what it would be if we did on a regular basis. But I've understood recently, especially as TikTok tries to promote live more, that it's something that you absolutely could do to pick up a lot of followers. So it's definitely something. In terms of I know there is a poll widget you can use, very similar to Instagram. We never actually used it. I considered it when we were doing this whole Choose Your Adventure series. I ended up opting out because I wanted people to write their own answers to what our adventure was going to be next. That's a separate conversation. But anyway, all those things are actually very effective. I think it's just whether or not it's just a case-by-case basis with a TikTok. In the same way, whether or not you should put text, in my opinion, on like TikTok is on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it makes perfect sense. Sometimes maybe you could do without. And as Alex alluded to, the text editor on TikTok is my enemy. I hate it so much. Yeah,
so terrible.
It's terrible. I edit on Premiere, so I can do the text on there. But I also wonder sometimes, I sort of freak out, like if I'm doing the text on Premiere, does it look too professional or polished or something? So there's kind of that battle of whether or not you should use the text editor or not.
Yeah. What this is a good opportunity to talk about kind of the technology stack everyone's using. I know, Dave, you do a lot of editing off of TikTok and bring it on. Alex, I think you have done a mix and you've used Adobe's new Rush, is Adobe Rush platform to do some editing. Nathan, I'm not sure what your production side is, but any thoughts on what tools, software you're using? Any tips on that for folks?
I just stick with the iPhone for the most part. I mean, I've used Adobe Premiere for I think 2 or 3 videos that just kind of required some elements that were outside of the available software on TikTok. But yeah, I don't know. It just depends on like what you're trying to do, and also like the time resources you have and the talent resources you have. Like, I'm not a video editor, so like my skill set is fairly limited as far as adding those features onto the video. But it's just, I just do everything on the phone. I got one of these. I didn't even realize I had it here. I didn't do this on purpose. Everybody has one of these, just like, a stand. You put your phone on, just set it up. Like, I don't have like Dave's got like the legit rig. But I don't know. It's just to everybody's point. I mean, I think everybody hates the software in TikTok. It's really clunky, and like it lags out constantly. Like, there's been times I've edited text into a video and then had it just disappear so many times, and I'm like, where did that go? It's not very functional sometimes, but it's also easier obviously than using off-platform stuff, depending on what your skill level is. So
lots of great answers in the chat here. We've had a lot of conversation in the chat and a couple questions before and currently about music. Dave, what's been your experience with the recent, for folks that don't know, there was a larger music audio library that kind of got shut down for verified brands?
Yeah, it sucked. The thing is, like, you knew it was coming at one point. Like, it makes sense that eventually Sony or whoever is going to be like, wait, you're just using our music for free. Like, that was part of the initial appeal I had to TikTok, or what was appealing to me was that I could edit, because I am an editor first, and that I could edit with this music, and it would be totally cool to use 15 seconds of like a Britney Spears song. Like, that's amazing that you could use that and publish it. That would normally cost thousands of dollars. So that was all very exciting. And then when they took it away, it sucked kind of how it happened. They didn't really warn anyone, to my knowledge. I think some people said later that they had been on the phone with TikTok and were told, but we weren't told. And so it was about 30% of our content using popular music. But, I said this on Twitter at the time, like, it's just another way to be creative. We just have to work around it. So TikTok is such a great place for creating things and using other people's original audio and their original music, which we've been trying to do since. So it's actually in some ways been a great way to like promote other people who are actually making music on the platform.
Yeah, and you mentioned if you do see an original sound that's trending and promoted by TikTok, that's pretty safe grounds.
Yeah. There's like weird remix songs that are like intentionally bad, and it's being promoted by TikTok, and I'm like, yeah, I'll use that.
There's I talked to Kimberly about this, and she had to hop off, but she said when they did some of their White Castle advertising, they allow you going through the ad process with TikTok to license some of that popular music if you want, and pay for it through them. But that is not necessarily, you might as well license it on your own and do your own licensing, because you're not really saving money. You're just doing that process through them. So if you have the resource to license stuff on your own, do it. If not, TikTok does have the opportunity, at least on the ad side, to do that. But I do think there's plenty of creative opportunities, either recording your own original sound, using other original sounds, and finding kind of up and coming music on the platform. But I know that's and I believe brands that are not verified can do that. So of course, can do that meaning can still use popular music on the platform. So that would come down to your own business and legal decision. I wouldn't want to advise you either way on that, but some businesses will take a risk on that and some won't. You'll likely eventually get takedowns, or they'll just mute that content eventually. A lot of questions around resources, as far as, a lot of agencies, businesses have limited resources right now, limited budget, limited staffing. Can you all speak to kind of the average time it takes you to produce a TikTok and what people could expect with that type of production?
I'm happy to take this question, mostly because I don't think it's any secret that Gannett, which is the company that owns USA Today and 206 local newspapers around the country, has been going through furloughs for the last 3 months and will be going through furloughs for the entire third quarter. So we have very, very limited resources right now. And the team is struggling to deal with that. I think it makes us feel like, we got to put TikTok on the back burner. We're trying really hard not to, because we know it's important. We know there's a new audience that we can reach there. But one thing that I try to express every single day to this team who's really dedicated to the platform is that we have to work within our bandwidth for every day. If a TikTok can't be made one day, it's okay. We can push it off to the next day. If we need to ask someone else to film in the camera app on their phone and then send it to us, and we'll edit it down in the TikTok app and add some captions, we'll do that. We're just, trying to work with what we have. But to keep the account active, we do post quite a bit of user-generated content. I think I mentioned this earlier, that those take 6 minutes, maybe max, from start to finish. Usually what we do is see that a video did really well on a platform like Instagram, or maybe even Facebook or Twitter, and then just reversion it full vertical to be able to fit on TikTok. The hardest part right now, going back to the sound question, is finding some music to put in the background of that. Sometimes we just go with whatever the sound is and it will show up as original sound by USA Today. But I'd say like 6 minutes to 3 hours is about what it takes to create a TikTok.
That's a good
so
range.
accurate. Yeah, it can range from like no time at all to just hours of your day.
Well, on the music side, I've heard from a couple folks that, keep in mind, people are listening to audio more on TikTok than other platforms. So the quality of your audio needs to be better than, or at least needs to be paid attention to a little bit more than other channels. So and music is very important to TikTok. So if you're putting music on there and you're trying to get just like some cheap freemium Beats music or another like more affordable platform, you may want to look at a higher production, higher kind of quality, music licensing option to get something that at least sound a little more like popular music or works on the platform a little better. I don't think that's required, but if you are going, especially for like an ad campaign, I think that's a direction to think in. But I'll also say we had a question about what higher education. I know we have a lot of universities on the webinar today. What can they do on the platform? And building off of the UGC direction, I think user-generated content, sourcing content from students, sourcing content from customers, from existing audiences. I think Chipotle does a great job sourcing UGC content for their TikTok. It's a great example to look at. So I think just find templates that are lower resource. If you really think if you really think TikTok can be a performance generator for you and you have some resources to put to it, I would take a look at just lower resource templates that you think you can use, because there are opportunities, like Alex explained, that could be in the minutes instead of the hours range to produce. And we had another question about about specifically spending time to create TikToks, spending budget to create TikToks. How are you making the case to do that versus another platform? I will say, I don't think your brand needs to jump to TikTok right now if everything you're doing is working on other platforms, you feel good about it. We've had some questions about ad opportunities. TikTok is more affordable, cost per click, than a lot of platforms, especially Facebook and Instagram right now. So I think it is potentially a better buy, especially if you want to reach a large audience and you're not getting great rates maybe on Facebook currently. That's an opportunity, but you don't have to jump on there just because. You make sure it's a strategic decision, and if you don't want to pull resources away from stuff that's working on other channels. I would just do some testing to figure out if it can be a new investment, if that makes sense. Very technical question here. Do you keep your videos in drafts before publishing, or do you edit them and then push them live immediately? Does it make a difference? How's your drafts folders out there?
I was told specifically, unprompted too, by someone at TikTok, that if you have something in your drafts for more than a week, it actually does affect it. I don't know why, but that's apparently the case.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, I think
writing that
I got
down.
the feeling that like someone else found out in the same way you just did, and she was very like, oh, I need to tell everyone this now because no one knows this. That's not normally what we do, but yeah, that's important.
We definitely keep things in our
Doesn't really
drafts.
make any sense.
It's a little frustrating though, because drafts, I don't know if anyone else works with a team, but drafts save to the device, not to the entire account. So if you're trying to get someone to approve it or get some feedback edits from others on your team, we actually go through this whole really long process of screen recording on your phone and then putting it in a group text and then waiting for feedback and then going back into the app. But knowing that keeping things in your drafts could affect the performance of a TikTok will definitely alter how we get things edited now.
Well, and I know we have some folks from TikTok on the webinar, so if there's clarity around that you'd like to provide, feel free to reach out and we can help spread the word on that. There's always, there's always something that you're not aware of, right? Some more questions. Political climate, a lot of political climate questions. How serious should you be on TikTok? Does TikTok lean in one political direction or another? Should brands just avoid political topics? Any thoughts on that direction?
I mean, we're news publishers.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for you to avoid, right?
I was actually told by someone, she famously made this TikTok where it was her resume for the post. She's like Loz Claus on TikTok. And I was actually actively trying to make her an intern, but we don't have an intern spot right now. But in that process, she told me specifically, you should really try to do politics more on TikTok. I think it would be effective. And she was right. After that, I started kind of allowing more politics onto the app, onto our account. And I do think people respond to it. It certainly can have some negative responses, but I think for the most part, it's definitely part of TikTok too. And probably another concern that people might have is that you worry about getting censored, but that doesn't happen. So.
Someone put in the chat that Now This has an entire politics account. It's really well done.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to check out.
There's a ton of political content. I mean, there's been, I don't remember if it was Taylor Lorenz or someone else who was writing about all the political news accounts that are driven by young kids in high school and college that are just literally specifically Democratic, independent, or Republican focused, and how they will, duet against each other and kind of battle against each other, almost in a debate style. So there is a lot of kind of news direction on there. So I don't think it should stop you from getting involved on the platform. But referring back to the panel's points earlier, I think comedic content, lighthearted content will perform pretty well. I think a lot of users, throughout the pandemic, we've been pointing to trends across all of social, how everyone's had a lift in users. I think TikTok and messaging services have seen the biggest lift in new users. Messaging just because people are trying to connect, right? But for TikTok, it's that entertainment, release, distraction, direction. And a lot of people are expecting that type of content on the platform. What do you think is the right starter pack of a viral video? This question made me think of, Dave, something you told me where, keeping people watching the video, the way you do that is you kind of leave a kernel coming late in the video that you point to. This is just a great storytelling technique to make sure that something is coming that they hang on to see. TikTok specifically has said a surprise, some type of, unseen thing late in the video works really well and makes it more shareable. Can you describe that a little bit and your experience keeping people tuned in?
I definitely tried to, if I can, sometimes it's a little harder, but have a beginning, middle, end, and even like a fourth act, so to speak, where it's like one last thing before they leave. And some of that's also specifically sort of designed around, like, for instance, like The Office, they have the cold open. That's like their famous thing that they made more famous, is the cold open on The Office. And I've talked about this before in other areas of how a lot of our TikToks are intentionally, especially when we're in the newsroom, meant to look like the show The Office because Gen Z loves The Office. And that actually is the same sort of storytelling I like to do when I can with our TikToks, is have those like zooms and those like moments and someone's reacting and you see someone looking directly at the camera at the end. I like to do a lot of those. And that's been pretty effective. Not something I can do as well here in my apartment, but it's still that beginning, middle, end, and maybe like a fourth joke right at the end before they leave that maybe even makes them want to watch the whole thing again just to watch that last part. Or just throw a dog in, and people like that.
Dogs and babies, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, I need to grab her actually.
There's music rights questions, like why is the music rights being limited? This is something every social network has to deal with, which is getting the music rights. TikTok had some from Musical.ly that I think expired, but also, if you look at IG stories or verified brands, you can't use popular music either. So it's something that every social network runs into. And and getting the rights for that as a business, especially a large business, is important. So you're going to run into that in a lot of places. B2B on TikTok, any examples of that? I haven't seen a lot of B2B. I've seen some museums and nonprofits that are definitely trying to appeal to businesses in different ways. I've seen a lot of B2B brands that I would expect to be on TikTok by now that aren't, and their names have already been taken, so they're gonna have to go through that process with TikTok to get them. Or they're just people posting on behalf of the brand that are not the brand in a very official looking way that is not official. So I would, at least if you're B2B and you're not sure, I would at least grab your name and start that conversation and make sure you're able to be tagged. Dave was telling me he's seen an increased trend of brands being tagged on TikTok, just like on Twitter. So that's cool as well. Anybody else have thoughts on B2B on the platform or any of that conversation?
I mean, technically, is it B2B? I don't know. I would say no, but Cisco's talent team, we work with them pretty closely, and Cisco is obviously always looking to recruit and make their Cisco brand look more attractive to the Zoomers, right? So what they're doing is they're bringing in their interns and starting up a TikTok account and having them kind of create content. That was something they did with Snapchat as well. So they're somebody that tends to use some of these emerging platforms, but also do it in a way that is just kind of a test and learn approach. But they're always trying new things. So I think that's an interesting example.
I like that. That's great. Anybody, Nick, have you dealt with any sports writers? Someone's asking, they have sports rights in the US and Canada, and wonder if they can geo-block content on TikTok to those countries.
All the sports. It certainly is interesting, especially with rights on the platform. So a lot of the leagues have gone and done rights deals with the platforms like TikTok directly. So certain elements can be shared. Not every team though has the rights. I don't think some of the NFL teams can use kind of clips from the games, right? Same thing. So they're limited. For some of our other kind of sports media customers, people like Fox Sports or even like the Barstool Sports of the world, who really don't have a lot of rights, I think it's a lot about creating the original content around your personalities. So, with Fox Sports, they have all the different anchors and they have clips from their original programming that might talk about a sport, they might not use a clip. So I think a lot of that is just tying that all together. If you do have the ability to use those rights in social because of the deals that you've negotiated, well, then you probably want to go and actually have a discussion with TikTok directly, because maybe there's a way, because I'm sure that there is a lot of geo-locking for some of the rights deals that they've done. Yeah, but
that makes sense.
I think original content is really, once again, going back to think what everybody else has said, even Dave and Alex and all the brands that can't use like the original music and the original songs. So what can you do? You could go and create your own content, right? Create your own music or audio, obviously go out and get that too. Same thing like with sports media or even media companies, even sports teams themselves, right? You have all of these elements like your athletes and bringing their personalities inside of there. The NFL, they did a TikTok dance with Roger Goodell and one of the top draft picks, where they each just recorded themselves doing a little dance in their living room before the draft, and then somebody edited them together, right? No draft footage, but just had personalities creating content. So those are some different ways to think about it.
I like it. We did one technical
dudes dancing.
One technical question. Can you get the completion rate on videos in the app metrics? Is that something you have to have an external for, or is that in the app completion rate? Anybody know?
I only know of watch time. Dave is occupied.
I only know of watch time too.
Yeah. So in TikTok, it's average watch time, minutes consumed. On Instagram TV, you get more of the retention, Facebook retention, Twitter retention, YouTube retention.
Great.
You pay close attention though to where most of our traffic is coming from. So is it the For You page? Is it people on your profile? Is it through a hashtag? I think that metric, it's not really a metric, but just looking at how people have gotten to your video is really important in order to know what you're programming for.
I like it. All right, we're going to wrap up, everyone. We are at the 90-minute mark. I think we could have kept going for 7 more hours with all the questions that you're sending. So I appreciate it. And we will do some follow-up. I think we're going to get some more people to talk TikTok with us and do some follow-up on this, both on the blog and maybe another webinar or interview. Dave, the social for the Law and Order TV show, said they would love to see your Law and Order TikTok. So
Wait, really? That's so funny.
Yeah,
they did.
They work with us at Conviva. We can, Marley from Wolf, I think,
Marley
is who's doing that. We can connect you guys.
And last question without spending too much time on this, but someone wants to know, Nathan, how do you get verified on TikTok?
I literally just typed out a response to them. I had emailed a TikTok rep like 4 or 5 months ago, and they sent me this kind of bizarre answer where it said that they were only verifying brands who had 500,000 followers or 5 million likes, to which I was like, that doesn't make any sense because I've seen plenty of brands with a blue check that have nowhere near that. So I unfortunately think, like most platforms, it's pay to play. I mean, it just depends on who your contact is. Like if you have a contact at TikTok or someone who knows somebody, other than that, it's just trying to force their hand by getting attention, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think their process has like evolved 5 different times. When we first got on, some guy contacted me via Twitter DMs and sent me like a really shady Word doc and said, sign this. And I was like, okay. And then we were verified the next day.
Same.
It worked out, but so I was just like, I guess this is okay. And then it happened. So like, all right, that's the right contact. But so I feel like they're just still young. They're still not even sure how to do that. So it just keeps changing.
A lot of these platforms, I think this is something I always remind myself, a lot of these platforms were never created for brands. They were never created for news publishers. They were, like we've been saying this whole time, they were created for pure entertainment and just normal people every day posting content. So I think about that with like Snapchat and Reddit. So it takes a long time for analytics to get up to speed and some of these other processes that we're used to on platforms like Twitter.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think they're moving pretty quicker than a lot of platforms have. So be patient with them, but do your best to get in touch with someone, use agencies, reach out to other social media folks that might have a contact. I think those are good steps. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you do want more information on improving your TikTok analytics, definitely check out Conviva. They don't just do TikTok analytics, but they are one of the only ones plugged into that API right now. But they've really helped invent social analytics for streaming video and for video in general, and they're a great social insights platform. So check out conviva.com. You'll see more information. We're going to email everyone next week for the actual video of this webinar, so you'll be able to rewatch it. We will actually read all the questions and try to draw kind of the broad themes out of there and get some follow-up content coming to you. Really appreciate everyone's time. Thanks to Kimberly who was on, Nick, Nathan, Alex, Dave. Appreciate all of your time and everyone that watched today. Stay tuned and we'll keep the conversation going. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye, Sam.